Welcome back, everyone, to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. I am super excited for today's guest. Tara Accardo is someone I met very early in the journey of building Support Now. I was just joking with her offline. She may have been one of the first kind of grief-related Instagram accounts I ever came across. And at the time, I found that just to be pretty amazing, honestly, to find someone that was so willing and open to talk about grief on social media. And I truly believe she's a trailblazer. But in addition to her own Instagram handle, Losses Become Gains, she also has an incredible podcast, which I've had the privilege of being on, called Life with Grief. And she's also a mom. So today, Tara, I'd like to welcome you to the Moms Like Me podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. What an intro. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So Tara, I assume, or let's assume rather for a minute, that people don't know your story and don't know kind of what got you into this world of grief. I assume that when you were a little girl, you did not think that on the side you'd be dabbling and talking about grief for fun, but here we are.
Was not on my bingo card, let me tell you that, which I don't think it is for most of us who work in this griefy space. Yes, so I will try and keep this, I'll try and explain the condensed version here. Basically, Losses Become Gains started ultimately with the deaths of both of my parents. So for the sake of time today, I will not go into the nitty gritty of everything that happened, but the long and short of it is my mom was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in like May or June of 2019. I hate the word battle, but she journeyed through that for probably maybe like 8 months or so. She died that December 9th of 2019. And not that it's any better or easier losing a mother as a son at all, but I think so many of us women can attest to for many of us at least, have this very sacred and special bond with our mother. There's just something about losing a mom that is, it reaches new depths of pain, I think, that we did not even know could exist for us. And my mom was my best friend, like many people here maybe listening can relate to. And it was devastating. There's really little words to describe it. But I think what was also really difficult about her passing was, how quickly it happened. And I always want to be cautious when I say that because, there are some people that lose their loved one in an instant, right? A car accident, some really tragic event. That is quick, right? In the grand scheme of things, it's all in the eye of the beholder, I like to say. But for my mom's diagnosis and kind of journey with it, it felt fast, at least for me. And she struggled with GERD. I don't know how many people here kind of know what GERD is. Kind of similar to acid reflux, but different. So really the changes that we saw in her were like she couldn't keep certain foods down and things like that. But she just didn't really also believe sort of in Western medicine, quite frankly. She was not someone that liked to go to the doctor very much, that kind of a thing. So my dad and I really grappled a lot with the what ifs and things when she died. What if she had gone to the doctor sooner? What if? What if she had just gotten her GERD looked at and taken care of and under control sooner? That kind of thing. So there's a lot that came with her death, obviously, and this goes for anyone missing a loved one. It's like their presence or lack thereof is deafening, I like to say. But then there's all of those, the what ifs, the guilt, the regret, the secondary losses and everything that come with that. It's just kind of shocking. It just didn't I've joked about this before. It didn't match my mom's personality, if that makes sense. She was this little Spitfire, Taurus, 5-foot, blonde, curly-haired little woman, kind of opposite of me, even though people say we have the same face, which I don't think we do. But anyway, it's a thought that counts. But she just, I'll say this bluntly, I didn't think cancer would be the thing that would take her out. You know what I mean? That would ultimately kill her. So it's a really harsh way of saying that, but that's my truth. And then with my dad,
Tara, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. How old were you when she passed?
She was 62. This was back in 2019, so it's been 5 years now. I'm 34 now, 27, 28.
Okay.
I think both of I was late 20s with both of my parents. Okay. My dad also had cancer. He had prostate cancer for 5 or 6 years at this point that my mom was diagnosed and ultimately died. And he went through his own journey with that, lots of different treatments over the years, but he was still a practicing criminal defense attorney. Incredible, incredible man. Total opposite of my mom in a lot of ways, but they were also very aligned, very similar on a lot of like the big things in life, And so they had just had this beautiful marriage, and he lost his best friend, right? He lost his wife. It's this partner of over 35 years. And when she died, I mean, obviously, I saw a shift in him. He was himself, but not really. I mean, just a bit of a shell of a human being, kind of. And so going into 2020, and then of course COVID comes about and all those fun things, his cancer diagnosis ultimately got worse. It began to spread from the prostate to his back and eventually into his brain. And it all sort of culminated one night. I mean, I could see he was kind of getting worse, but it really came to smack me in the face one night when this is a whole nother podcast for another day. But my now husband and I, we were just dating at the time. We had actually broken up. This is a long story, but I think it just had a lot to do with like everything that was going on at the time. It just, things had changed. So we broke up on this particular Sunday night. I come back to where my parents were living, and my dad was like essentially catatonic in bed. He had been responding to my text messages, but he didn't even sound like himself. He couldn't really like put together sentences properly. It was very scary. That was the second time I'd had to call an ambulance for him. So that same night he was admitted into an ICU at a local hospital here, and he just never really came out of care after that. He went from an ICU to essentially a like a pre-hospice facility, but within that facility they had hospice as well. So he kind of just moved into hospice eventually, and died about 6 months, almost 7 months later,
Wow.
after my mom. So ultimately also from cancer, but again, with COVID going on and everything, I couldn't like see him like I would normally be able to. And I just remember I was with my cousin that day. Was able to come up, and I just remember thinking like, I'm literally going to lose another parent here. Like, this is actually going to happen. Like, and just in such shock over it. And yeah, so basically fast forward another like year and a half, almost two. My 19-year-old dog had also died the following year, and she was like the last little bit of joy that I had left in my life. And of my immediate family unit, it was just me, my mom, and my dad, and my dog, Princess. She was like the little sister I never had. And so they were just all gone. And I remember the night that she died, it was middle of the night, and driving home, and I was like, is this rock bottom? Because I thought I had already hit it. Guess not. Joke's on me. It was
Wow.
just rebuilding from there, And so in the beginning of 2022, I was actually in a session with a medium that I go to, that I've been going to for basically since my mom died. I go to her every once or twice a year. And we were in the middle of this conversation, but I had gotten to a point in my grieving experience where I felt like there was more I needed to do with it, so to speak. There was like, I felt being very called to help people, or at least like do something with what I had learned and how I had grown. And in that conversation, this kind of phrase, like losses become gains. Yeah, like I'm creating gains from my losses, came up. And then I remember leaving that call, and I was like, that's it. Losses become gains. There's something here. And that whole year I just started writing, because writing is really big for me. And I just wrote blog after blog after blog with the intention of launching it just to have, be a resource for people who are also struggling with the same thing. Launched it in November of 2022. And then very quickly after, it certainly didn't like blow up right away or anything, but I could see people were resonating with it, and they were grateful for my writing, which is amazing. So I became a grief coach shortly after. And then the podcast came. And so it's really just been kind of a snowball effect. And then I got certified in soul purpose and transformational life coaching. And so it's just been one thing after another. I've just felt like I've been very divinely led, I think, into this space. And I just kind of go with wherever I feel like I can meet people, where they're at in their grieving journey. That's really the resource I hope to be for people.
Your story is it's so sad, and it is, I know you know this, it's so important to talk about, because I think that when you're in your 20s, early 30s, you're just not thinking about your parents dying. I mean, even seeing your parents get sick. I mean, I always am amazed when I talk to friends of mine who have lost parents, how no matter what, it catches you off guard. You're just never prepared for it. And I think what you said earlier about your mom, about how like cancer wasn't the way, you didn't see her going out like this. And I think that there's some grief in that as well. Like, no, 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 this isn't supposed to be the way that you're supposed to go out. We all know we're going to go out, but in a way, you almost like you project what you think that's going to be like for the people that you love, which
Yeah.
is a really like interesting layer to discern in the process. Because not only are you grieving the fact that she's not well and coming to terms with that she's going to die, it's also like, no, this is not. You're not ready for this, and
Yeah.
this is not for you. I think that's just a really interesting point that you brought up.
Yeah.
I'm so curious, Tara, to ask you, how hard is it to talk about grief on a regular basis while also going through your own individual grief process? Or are they just so connected that it's one?
I would say the latter, actually. Yeah. To put it super bluntly, talking about it has been like a catharsis for me. I mean, it has completely and utterly changed the way that I process grief, that I feel my grief, being able to hold space for other people's grief. It just makes you feel a little less alone in the whole process. You realize there are people out there feeling very similar things, maybe if not just like you, because they might have experienced something a little bit different or whatever it is. But I always say like there's a lot of really universal feelings and emotions we might feel around grief that are the same, right? Loneliness, sadness, anger, confusion, all of these things. And you realize how many people are out there feeling that to some degree too. And
Right.
there's this weird human interconnectedness, I think, that we can tap into and that I feel like I've tapped into, and my podcast has definitely helped with this as well, just hearing so many stories like yours.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't gone through, like, loss in a super, traditional, like, via a death or something. But there's people out there that care, and I like to think myself as one of those people. So it's just but I've also I don't know how to, like, kinda put this, but I feel like it's kind of, like, transcended into something bigger than just me and my grief. Like, this sounds very woo-woo, but, like, the calling that I feel to do this work and to help people in their grieving journey is, like, I almost kinda can't put it into words. Speaking of kind of that soul purpose coaching that I mentioned that I got into, like, that doing that certification was very, very eye-opening and transformative for me as well. And so there's a part of me that it's like, yeah, yes, because I get that question a lot. How do you talk about grief and death and loss every day? But there's so much more to it than that. It's yes, absolutely. It's holding space for those darker emotions, those heavy emotions, and that is heavy. And I do. There's practices I do before and after sessions like that, because I have to protect my own energy and my space
Sure.
too, and everyone has to do that, right? So there's little things that I do to kind of shake it off, so to speak. But in a lot of my conversations too, and in a lot of my content and all the things, there's also a sense of hope and joy and fulfillment that I want to instill in people, and I want them to know is still out there despite going through whatever it is we're going through. And again, I've kind of touched on this. I always want to meet people where they're at. And that's what's tough about posting on social media, right? Like or even on your podcast, whatever, you're meeting people at a lot of different phases of where they're at. So I always like to say, take what you need and leave the rest. But also I think it's really important to hear really inspiring stories and be surrounded by this, like, even if it doesn't really resonate with you in the moment, it might later, and that is really how I've gotten to this point in my journey as well. I opened myself up to abundance and happiness and joy and allowing myself beautiful experiences. I could still, move forward in my life, carrying my parents and my dog and their memory and everything with me. But also just not allowing myself to be so overcome and owned by it, Like, I was like, "No, I'm gonna take my power back on this." Like, I'm not somebody I was interviewing recently, they were just like, "I just got sick and tired of feeling sick and tired." And
Mm,
I was like,
yeah.
"Preach. That's same." Same. I
Yeah.
wasn't gonna live there. My parents never would have wanted that for me either. So
Did this experience or these experiences ever impact your idea or thoughts about motherhood?
never. If I'm being really, really honest, not once. I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I'm not gonna sit here and say that that was, like, my life's purpose or that, I was always meant to be a mom. But I never envisioned myself without a child. We'll just put it that way. At the same time, there's little things, many things we can't control in life. So I'm like, listen, if I'm blessed to have one, or maybe more, we only have one at this point, then maybe that's my journey. And I would have to find peace in that. But that's an interesting question though, too. And I'm so glad you asked that because I have spoken to people that don't even want to get married without that. They've literally either called off or postponed their wedding because they can't imagine doing it without their parents. Um,
Mm. God, that makes me so sad. That gave me chills. Yeah.
without the yeah, and it breaks my heart because I never wanna put the words in anyone's loved one's mouths, but I just can't imagine our loved ones would want us to stop living and stop wanting the things that we want in our heart for ourselves because they're gone. I mean, death is just a part of life. Like, we can't one of the most humbling things about death, right, is, like, you realize the world does not stop because your loved one died. We wish it would sometimes, but it just doesn't. So for me, it was never there was never a thought in my mind that I just wasn't going to have a child. I really also wanted a daughter. I would love a son too, but I really wanted my girl. I wanted that experience and that bond that I had with my mom. Like, if anything, I'm not gonna say it made me, like, more excited for parenthood because I knew I would be going through it all without them, but, yeah, no, I willed that baby into fruition. She was coming.
I do think that death allows you to experience life more fully. You can't experience life without experience death because you can't possibly understand the gravity and like how meaningful relationships
Yes.
really are until you know what it's like to lose that. Uh, and it sounds like for you, the relationship with you had with your mom is it's so griefy now because you loved her so much, and that's only like now you can give that bond back to your daughter, which is so beautiful on so many different layers. I guess in some ways, it sounds like you were an only child. You are an only child.
Mhm.
Did the experience impact how you consider your own family planning? Like, are you of that mindset of like, no, I want to have more than one because I know what it's like to do this alone? Or is it also like, nope, it's God's plan and I'm just, it's gonna be what it's gonna be?
I think I've always been that girl is like, not I don't wanna say, like, so cliche, like, "What's meant to be will be," but, like, I do think there's a little bit of that out there, at least for me. So yeah, I listen, if I'm meant to have a second one, I'm meant to have a second one. If not, ultimately, I would be beautifully and perfectly happy with my daughter. But from a young age, yeah, but when I was, like, had my imaginary friends, it was pretending I had a family. I always had more than 1. Probably not more than, like, 2 or 3, but I never saw myself only having 1.
Yeah.
So, again, I feel very blunt in saying this, but no, it never, I will say, though, going through losing both parents, especially back to back like that, and all that as an only child, absolutely horrendous. 0 out of 10 would recommend. Like, it was so rough. It's still rough and not that it's, not any less rough for people who have siblings. I completely understand. I will never say it's easier or it's hard. It's just different, right? But there is something to be said about not having even one person, even remotely related to you, having the same parents that can begin to empathize with, like, the gravity of that loss. And not to mention, I went through a horrible probate process with their estate, and there's just a lot of, like, technical things too, dealing with all of their belongings. I mean, it literally all fell onto me. It's still all on me.
But that's a very real part of it, right? It's not you don't just get to be sad. You also have to deal with the logistics of unwinding someone's life or rather like trying to get closure on everything that's financial, physical, moving. I mean, that's a full-time job.
It is, yeah, and on top of your grief, which is already a full-time job, and then an actual 9 to 5 job that I had, like, it was just, it's a lot, and you really, yeah, it almost kinda, like, numbs your grief a little bit. You really I've learned a lot about compartmentalizing in these last several years of like, okay, I have my grief hat on right now. Okay, now I got to take that off, and now I got to go to the CPA and deal with him and go do that appointment completely blind, not understanding a thing, not wanting to even, it's just a lot of that kind of stuff. So to go back to the kids thing really quickly, yes, I kind of always envisioned having more than one, but I would love for our daughter to potentially have a sibling, but that's not why. It's not because like, oh, I know we're gonna die one day and I don't want her to be alone. I kinda just always envisioned it that way. But yes, that would be really nice that when that day happens, like, that she doesn't have to navigate it all by herself.
I have a couple more questions related to you being a mom, but before I do, what pressure do you feel to preserve your parents' stories and memories? I mean, part of the value, of course, of having siblings is like you have more people, like you said, to talk about this with and to converse about, and everyone has their shared albums and stories. Kind of like, how have you decided to pursue life and like preserving their memory in a way that you can pass that on to your daughter?
Truthfully, I feel a lot of pressure to have to remember everything, right? Like, I don't like my childhood or anything that was sacred between myself and my parents. Like, since I don't have a sibling to help remind me of stuff, like, I am very concerned. I don't let this keep me up at night. But yeah, there are times where I'm just like, I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to convey my parents well enough to my daughter. I'm worried I'm gonna forget mannerisms or things that they would have said or, just all of those things. It's very, very difficult. I definitely worry about that. I think for me, what I've also realized is inevitably with time and aging and whatever, you're gonna forget things, right? You more time passes between where you are now and the passing of your loved one. You create new memories. Life goes on, and I've come to remember and feel like there's core memories, there's specific things that my parents did or said or trips that we went on or whatever that I will always remember. There are things that my family will, bring up that I either didn't know or remind me of, and that unlocks certain things. So I do make sure I still, talk to my family about them and all of that, and they want to keep them alive too, so that's great. But I've also remembered or remind myself rather that and this is I certainly didn't make this up, and it is probably a little bit cliche, but it's that expression of like, people you might not remember exactly what they said, but you'll remember how they made you feel.
Right. The Maya Angelou quote.
I remember how my parents made me feel.
Yeah.
My daughter, she's not gonna remember 99% of the things I say to her in her lifetime, because guess what? I don't remember 99% of what my mom said to me either. All I remember generally is the guidance, the wisdom, the walks that we would go on. There are obviously specific memories within there that I remember, but I also give myself grace. I have to know that like when I'm God willing, 85 or whatever, I'm not gonna remember everything my mom or my dad said to me. So giving myself grace that like, okay, some of these memories inevitably they're gonna fade. Journal, write down what you can remember. I think there's definitely physical things we can do to like, keep those memories alive and like get them out of our brain a little bit if we're worried about forgetting. But really for me, I've also taken on that mentality of like, let me make my daughter feel as loved and cherished and taken care of and cared for as my parents made me feel. And at the end of the day, if I can succeed in that, so to speak, then I am doing a good job. And then they're kind of living through me as I'm doing that.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah, it's the Maya Angelou quote. People won't remember what you said or what you did, but people will remember the way you made them feel. It's one of my favorite quotes ever, and I do think that it's actually it's so powerful to use that phrase to describe your mom because it's to me it's one of the best tips that you can give a new mom. New
Yes.
moms, we put so much pressure on
Oh
ourselves,
my god,
especially in the
yeah.
world of Instagram, that we have to have it all together for our kids, whether that's, decorating for certain holidays and having certain traditions and the matching outfits and the perfect vacations. There's so much pressure
Yes.
to do those things for moms today. And what you just said is, to me, like some of the best advice you can give to a new mom, which is kind of throw that away. because all they're really going to remember, especially in the early years, I'm talking like sub 10 years old, is
Yeah.
that you cared for them, that you loved them, that you were there for them when they had difficult moments, and that you cheered them on during their happy moments. And that's ultimately like where strengths of relationships come from, is like that emotion that you feel like here,
Exactly.
not what you remember here.
Yeah.
So I think that is, it's just kind of a beautiful like transition. And so I am curious to ask you more about, you know, how it's been to raise a child without
Yeah.
grandparents on her mom's side. What is that like? And what advice do you have for people that are listening to this that might sadly be in the shoes that you're in?
I have a client who's in very similar shoes right now. She had her baby months later than I did, and really struggling with it too. And it's like I wish I had some really like transformative, powerful advice. What I'll start with is the how it's been. It's been an exhausting, magical, amazing, life-changing experience, as having a child is. It's brought up new layers of grief for me, 100%, that I did not know before, had never tapped into before. This is why I always shout from the rooftops, like, grief does not have a timeline. This is why, right? I didn't have a child 5 years ago. My husband, who thankfully has 2 very happy, healthy parents, I am so grateful that my daughter has them as present grandparents, right? That they even care, that they're dying to see her, that they're 20 minutes away, right? Very, very grateful for that. There's 2 things here. Number 1, that will never make up for my parents not getting that experience with her. That is something I grieve on a weekly basis, daily basis. In those moments where I wish we had a babysitter and they could watch her. I mean, in all of the like profound emotional moments, but also all of those logistical moments where it's like, God, it'd be so nice if we could like just have her be with my mom. And well, my dad too, but my mom was like, so just good with babies. And yeah, she would have been incredible. The other thing too that has been a dagger in the heart many, many, many times is seeing that relationship that they have with my daughter and knowing that my parents don't have that. So this sounds a little bit repetitive to what I just said, but it's like it's like kind of grieving 2 different things, right? It's like them not being here, but then I'm also, and I hope this does, I don't want to say it this way, but I don't have a better way of saying it. I'm also like forced to watch my in-laws get that experience when I feel so robbed like for myself and on behalf of my parents too. I never pictured them not being here at least to meet her. My God, at least for a few months. I would have taken at least that. But not only did they miss her birth, they missed my weddings and my engagement and literally everything else. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. And it's going to be the rest of my life with this, because as long as my daughter is in my life and I'm in hers, like this is always going to be present. Her graduation, her getting married, all these things. That's really overwhelming when we think of it that way, though. So I always tell myself, tell clients, whatever, like, come back to the present moment, because all you got is right here, right now. We can't get ahead of ourselves on those things. And really, I think the way I've coped with that and managed it is a few things. Number 1, my daughter wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for my parents. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for my parents, right? So as much as I grieve the fact that they're not here for me, for her, that I don't get to see that relationship play out and live out and everything, I try my best to approach it from a place of gratitude, because my daughter has completely and utterly changed my life for the better in the most incredible ways. And that would not have happened if it weren't for them. So there's where I always like kind of try and start. But also just, knowing that I always try and come at grief from a little bit of a factual place too. And this can be a bit harsh sometimes, that we have to have these conversations with ourselves. But like, because we can get really hung up on the coulda, woulda, shouldas, the what ifs, the if onlys, if only my mom were here, if only my dad were here. But like, ultimately, where a lot of this grief work comes from is like, absolutely, that is so valid. That makes complete sense. You feel that way, but that is not your reality. That is sadly not the case. Yep, you're right. It's not. And it's like those little realizations over and over and over again, they're horrendous. It doesn't mean that those things don't hurt, but like at the same time, it's so much more excruciating living in the if onlys and the what ifs and all of these things. You can't go back and change it. They're gone. To put it very bluntly, they have died, right? I try and use the word like they have died. They're dead, right? They're dead. There's no changing that reality. So this is where I think in grief we have a chance to make a choice. Where am I going to live? Am I going to live in the wallowing? Am I going to live in the, oh my God, I wish they were there? And those moments, I do allow myself to wallow, by the way, a little bit here and there. Like, I think it's actually kind of healthy too. You're processing your grief, right? You're grieving. That's fine. But I let that moment come and I let it go. I don't stay there. Instead, I do my best when I'm ready to shift that to a place of abundance. Okay, here's what I do have. Gratitude for what I do have. And that's not to just sprinkle gratitude over it and toxic positivity over it and call it a day. It's not about that. It's just being like, I'm choosing happiness right now.
Well, and I think the overarching theme that I'm hearing from you and learning through you is that, again, this is where multiple things can be true at the same time. I mean, I want to go back to what you said earlier. Like, you can love and appreciate your in-laws. You can love and appreciate the relationship your daughter has with them, and that you're so happy that they have this experience with her, and she is going to have this experience with them. And you can be upset and jealous and feel like
A little salty.
a little salty, yeah. That you also don't get this experience as the mom to see her parents
Yeah.
play and interact with their granddaughter. Like, both of those things are true, and I think that is the ultimate goal for grievers, I feel like, is really learning that you don't have to be one or the other, that both can be true, and to be honest about that. Because I would imagine you've had to have certain conversations, probably with your mother-in-law more than your father-in-law, of like, I love you and I appreciate you, and this is still really hard for me. And I don't know that it's ever not going to be hard for me, but just know that I love you regardless of how I might, have these moments, these temporary moments inside that make me really sad. And again, maybe just a little jealous.
Yeah. I'm very communicative about that with my husband too. I'll be very honest with you. And it's not because I'm not comfortable talking about that with my in-laws. I've also just really honed in my like kind of grief coping tools in those moments. I take deep breaths or whatever. So I don't like internalize it in a negative way. I've really learned to work through it within myself. And if
Yeah.
anything, I really make sure my husband's aware, because there were times early on in my grieving journey when I was like, and this is, before my daughter came along or anything, and he would be like, man, I really miss my mom this week, or oh, I really wish I could have gone played baseball with my dad. I really miss him. And I was like, how dare you miss your parent? What are you talking about? Like, where do you get off saying you miss your parents? At least you can go text, right? Those at least statements, those are really tricky and really brutal. And we have to be so careful with those, because those can go both ways, right? As grievers, we can have those said to us, but then we can come from a place of like spite and resentment. And that's not okay either. It's not my husband's fault that my parents died. It's not his fault that he has two happy, healthy parents. If anything, good for him. I'm so thrilled for him. That's not my reality. That was not my experience, unfortunately. But that's not his fault. And so I've learned, in my, again, early grief, I was really quick to judgment with that. But like ever since then, more self-awareness has come into the picture, and I check myself anytime I'm feeling those moments of, resentment for things that are not within my control. And yeah, and so I just, since then, I've been really honest with him, and he's gotten better about it too. Listen, he's had his moments. He's human. He's allowed to express that he misses his parents, even though they're still alive and well, and 20 minutes away. Like, I ca I can't carry that anger with me the rest of my life.
I just think I think hearing you talk is so inspiring for someone that, whether you've lost both parents or one parent, these are just very real, honest thoughts, opinions, especially when you're young. Part of the people that listen to this podcast, they tend to be in their 30s and 40s. They're in that sandwich generation where they're becoming caregivers, they're parents themselves. And that transition of learning what it's like to really come to terms with the fact that you are going to soon be taking care of your parents, watching them get sick or get ill, not all the time, but oftentimes, while also trying to navigate the messiness of parenthood. It is, I don't think there is truly no book, no Instagram handle. There is nothing out there that can prepare you for that. I myself have not yet experienced it, but I am starting to see it more and more in my personal life. And it's devastating.
Yeah.
It's completely devastating. And the hardest part that I am starting to see is, you get a cancer, someone gets a cancer diagnosis for their parent, and it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. And you really, it changes you.
It does.
And I think, Tara, you are just a shining light for people to show them that this is not easy, but this is life. And once you accept that this is what life comes with, you can now prepare yourself with the tools and the support system that you need to keep moving forward. Because if you can't get stuck, you're allowed to have moments where you can pause and you're allowed to say this sucks and this is not fair. Like, you can say that, but it sounds like you just can't stay there. You can't stay there for too long, because what you're saying is there's too many things. There's too much abundance waiting for you. And so I just want to say thank you. I was excited for this conversation because I think that you have such a unique story, and you carry yourself with such positivity, not in a toxic way, in a very approachable way that gives light to people, to show them that no matter how difficult the situation is, and I am sure it is very difficult, that there's light. So thank you so much for your time today. I would love for you to share where people can find out more about you, where they can follow along, all the things. Of course, we want to support you in any ways we can.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for this conversation and giving me. It's fun being, as you know, as a podcast host. It's fun being on the other side.
It's so fun being on the other side.
Yeah, and also an excuse to talk about my parents. Let's be real. So yes, so losses become gains. Again, is sort of my baby, my second baby, if you will. And you could just find me at lossesbecomegains.com. Like, pretty much everything is on my website. I offer a couple little mini courses. There's definitely lots of resources there where, like I said earlier, I like to meet grievers where they're at. So, wherever you're at in your grieving journey, if you're kind of it's newer, it's raw, there's something for you. If you're a little more seasoned in your grief, let's say, like myself, and are kind of ready for the next step, I'm, at least as of the time of this recording, coming out with something really fun and exciting for that, to help you kind of step into your purpose, your next transformation, if you will. So, you can check that out. But I also have the Life with Grief podcast, as you mentioned. So yeah, that's been going for, I don't know, we're approaching 2 years now, and it's the hands down most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Yeah,
love it. I love podcasting. This is great. Yeah, it's great. So, yeah, that's mostly where you can find. Oh, and then on Instagram at Losses Become Gains and at Life with Grief podcast. And then I'm on TikTok for the podcast as well.
Awesome, Tara. Well, I was not worried about this conversation. I had a feeling you would thrive as you do. And again, thank you for what you do and for being so committed to this. And I can clearly see how treasured your parents were and how proud they are of you and everything that you have done to honor them. So thank you so much for being here, and look forward to many more conversations.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it.